I interviewed all these guys about 25 years ago, so virtually the only person who's still alive is Paul Levitz. You know, so all of them are gone, so unfortunately.
So were they pretty approachable back then? I mean, how did that interview process start?
Well, it was twofold. Originally, Craig Flessel, Vince Sullivan, and were both in Long Island, and I interviewed them at the same time in 1996, I think. It was before Craig moved out to California. And then I interviewed Fred Gardner at San Diego at Comic-Con when he came here in '98. The Flying Tiger guys I interviewed in the early 2000s. And, you know, I basically use that as a way to figure out how you do a thumbnail biography on someone who's no longer alive.
Yeah.
It was an experiment for me to see if it worked.
Right.
And I used a lot of that material for an article I did in Alter Ego about Bert Christman. So all of those materials helped me out. But it's great to see a visual, and it's really good to listen to someone actually tell the story when you see it, as opposed to the written word. Anyway, so Malcolm Wheeler-Nicholson was born in 1890. His grandfather was a cavalry officer and in the Union Army, and he adored him. You know, he idolized him as a father figure, and his mother was a writer. So both of those things kind of figured into what Malcolm Wheeler-Nicholson would become. He became an Army officer, cavalry officer. He was assigned to a lot of places around the world. He was in Manila. He was the 9th Cavalry, which was the Buffalo Soldiers. So he was a white officer taking command of African American soldiers who were called Buffalo Soldiers. He was with them in Manila, in the Philippines, and after that he ended up on assignment to a lot of places around the world, Siberia, Afghanistan, and so he ended up having this quest for adventure, and then he became a writer, pretty much the way his mother was a writer. His mother was a journalist, which was kind of unusual for her day in the teens, the aughts, as my grandfather would say, and my grandfather would say, in the teens. And he after he left the service, and I'm not gonna, the background, how many people have seen this book, or anyone read it?
Yes.
Not just look at the pictures? Just check it. So you know most of his background, you get what's there. So he became a pulp writer, and the thing is that Nikki is writing a biography about the Major. So the point is, I'm not going to get into the court-martial or any of the specific backgrounds of the Major, because she's done research both on the court-martial that he was subjected to, and also the bankruptcy proceedings that took place at DC Comics. So I'm basically going to cover the era and look at some of the stuff that was there, and talk about some of the individual artists that either I researched or met. So he was, if you look, he always took up a lot of space because he always had a big name, so you can always see it at the bottom there. He became a pulp writer and did a lot of pulps throughout the 30s. I think at the 20s. I think he became really curious about the comic book business. It obviously had started up, but all of the comics in the day were newspaper reprints, and they were paid for with a licensing figure. So he was the first person to put together a wholly new comic material that was designed specifically for a comic book. New Fun came out, and I have some images from it, and I'll show you at the end of this. But he also It was new fun for the first 6 issues. 7 and 8 were more fun, and then with issue 9 it became more fun comics. But you can see this is from more fun 7. You can see, he ended up adapting some of his pulp stories into short stories for the comic book. So he was, and you can see this is the editorial staff that was there at More Fun number 7 now.
And something to note is Lloyd Jacket, he was the editor for the first 4 issues of New Fun, but I think there was a little bit of a hiatus, and then the Major actually took over to edit and publish for a few issues there.
As well as writing a lot of the individual features. And it's interesting to look at this because Cook and Mahan left to start
Centaur.
what would become Centaur. It was Udom. And I was told by both by Craig Flessel and Fred Gardner that it was basically because of money. But here's the thing, there's one thing I realized, it took me a long time to figure this out, but Fred Gardner, Vince Sullivan, and Craig Flessel were all in their early 20s when they started working for Major Malcolm Wheeler-Nicholson. So you got to be able to figure out, they had a limited business experience. They were basically creative guys. They had very little knowledge of day-to-day business. So their reflection of what they talked about in those days is basically their opinion more so than actual fact. Because I can tell you for a fact that Nikki will tell you that, and as everyone knows, I think, who's been in any kind of business, a startup is a very tough business. And a lot of times startups can be relatively successful, but in order for long-term success, you need to have people who are actually accustomed to and know enough about business to be able to take it over.
I think also about new material, it's harder for distributors to feel comfortable distributing that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because like if they're
It's not a known name.
it's not a known name. Whereas if it's an established licensed character like Dick Tracy, then sure, they feel comfortable and they'll distribute it and will sell better.
Exactly.
Was this the first name of the company, More Fun Magazines?
Yes,
Well,
and it was Allied. It was New Fun was the first,
It says here More Fun.
but
Yeah,
that's
that-
number 7.
Oh, it's number 7.
After some issues, then it becomes called More Fun.
Okay.
It was,
Company,
yeah.
is it?
No, the comic book, but the company was called National Allied Publications. But then
Said
they,
here More Fun Magazines.
It was changed after number 8.
Oh, okay.
So 7 and
I
8.
get fascinated with all the name changes. There's so
Yeah.
many of them.
Well,
Right.
and by the way, it was originally Allied Publications too. First issue was.
Just because there's so many name changes.
for sure, especially at this time.
And the thing is, they also had a lot of, they wanted to appeal to a broad audience. So there were a lot of there were comic features, but there were also things about current events and movies. That's Henry Fonda at the bottom. So they did columns about, there's the Shave Sale page. Ah, there's number 8. See, More Fun Magazine. So, in the early issues, there was this is an ad that was in More Fun number 7 for New Comics number 1, which became New Adventure, which became Adventure Comics. And you can see Vince Sullivan was the artist. It's interesting that Vince Sullivan and Whitney Ellsworth were 2 of the editors, but they were also cover artists for a lot of these early magazines. And More Fun had a lot of comic covers, meaning the Vince Sullivan type stuff. They had puzzle pages. They had stuff to keep people busy. Stamps and coins. It's like Boy's Life with with more comic strips than the back of Boy's Life.
Was it more like a regular sized magazine then? or
It was a large size. It was
Big.
about this size.
Oh.
Big comic.
And then it came down in size with number 9. It's really interesting to see how big they were. But a lot of these early comic artists ended up doing, this kind of stuff. Jack Burnley did the same kind of thing for Eastern Publishing and DC Comics, but they would do background pieces on sports. Then the other thing is they also had clubs, and you could join a club and get a pin. This was sold through an auction house. So this is a Vince Sullivan piece. More Vince Sullivan. It's funny. I asked him if he was if he thought of himself as a cartoonist. He said, no, not much. And he actually did a couple of serious strips. This one's from More Fun.
But he also became a publisher of his own magazine, right? The magazine.
Magazine Enterprises.
ME in 1950.
He did. But most of the stuff he did was, comic stuff. That's Whitney Ellsworth. Whitney Ellsworth became one of the key editors for Superman, and eventually ended up going to California to oversee the Adventures of Superman television show with George Reeves.
Didn't he help establish like the morality of the DC superheroes, like in 41 or so?
Yeah, he did. And we know Vince Sullivan by then had left, so Whitney Ellsworth was there. Julie Schwartz was there.
Did he write it as well as do the artwork? Was he the writer as well?
On the comic stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is like
But the
entirely
series-
by him.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is, that's Craig Flessel on the left and Fred Gardner on the right. Fred didn't like fishing, but Fred Gardner liked fishing, and he convinced Craig that he should go with him. You can see that he's kind of stepped away from the fish, okay? So Craig Flessel and Fred Gardner, along with Vince Sullivan, were basically the cover artists for all the pre-hero. Here's a guy. So all the pre-hero stuff.
I think the Major also kind of would throw plots at some of these artists, right?
He'd give them plots, but in a lot of cases he wrote the scripts.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of stories. This is one of Craig Flessel's interior pieces for More Fun, the Bradley Boys, and I think he ended up writing most of this stuff. Hancock the Cowhand by Fless. By the way, this is Craig Flessel's wife Marie. This was her favorite strip. Pat Morgan was. All these characters kind of faded away after the heroes came in, but this was a Fred Gardner cover. Another Fred. So you can see that they basically set the tone for a lot of the pre-hero stuff. Now Siegel and Schuster started working for them with More Fun 6.
Yeah. And that was they did like a swordsman.
They did Henri Duval,
Yeah,
and they did Dr.
Duval.
Occult, both of which were in More Fun. This is from number 7. And here's the other thing about the early comics. A lot of this stuff was a combination of color and black and white, and some of it was two-tone, where they'd have just blue and black or red and black color to save money. So you could have Dr. Occult like this, and then you could have the next issue would be a color strip. And these are consecutive issues, by the way. And there's Henri Duval.
Oh,
Yes?
I just want to say that, and I don't know it to be true, but it should be.
That's a great
that the Major looked at the Henri Duval story and said, "You guys don't know how to do horses," and they had to redraw the horse scenes in there a little bit because, of course, he understood horses.
And just so you know, it's Jim Thompson, who apparently loves horses a great deal.
Yeah.
I
Horse analyst.
have loved a few in my time. Yes.
He has a Facebook page that lists, how many you got?
2016.
1,016 horses by different artists.
Comic artists doing
Each
horses.
one, yeah.
So Siegel and Schuster came in and did these early strips. There's Dr. Occult. Now, later on in the strip, you can see this this actual strip is the one that was quoted as being a model for Superman, because you can see the red cape and you can see kind of the hero look of a superhero.
And that's after that one issue that was in, that went to Centaur, to the pre-Centaur guys, the Dr. Mystic chapter, right? And then after that, then he's
Became
wearing this
Dr.
outfit.
Cole.
Yeah.
And that's the second page. The next, see, he's flying. They also did Radio Squad. They did about 5 or 6 different strips before they got to Superman. I mean, they had done, obviously everyone knows they had done Superman before, but before it was published, they were still working on a lot of original stuff for the Major. And by the way, here's a pay slip for them. So when they did Federal Man and they did Slam Bradley, they were getting $10 a page. So 10 pages was $100. And they got paid for the continuity on Federal Man. That's their script cost. So one of the other artists that worked for the Major early on was Walt Kelly. This is one of the interior pieces in early Adventure. And he also did double page spread in Adventure 2, or New Comics 2. This was before he ended up doing. He ended up going to work for Disney on some of his early features, most notably Pinocchio, before he started doing a lot of comic book work, which eventually became comic strip work and program. Leo O'Melia, the thing is, the Major ended up hiring people who either were old-timers who had been around for a long time, or brand new guys who were just breaking it in the field. Leo O'Melia was a guy who had been around a long time. This is a picture from 1907. He was living in Rochester, New York as a sports cartoonist. This is from 1909. And a quick story. In the old days, there were traveling motion picture shows whereby animators would end up doing animation shows and do chalk talks. Winsor McCay used to do Gertie the Dinosaur. When he did Gertie the Dinosaur, I don't know if you ever heard or seen it, but he basically talks to Gertie and tells Gertie what to do, knowing obviously what she's going to do, and then the dinosaur does that. So he would go around the country doing these shows, and he ended up going to Rochester, and after, they do all kinds of stuff in a vaudeville theater, and then when they finish, they play cards. Well, Leo O'Melia played cards with Winsor McCay, and Winsor McCay saw his stuff and said, "You're really good. If you come to New York, I'll hook you up with a syndicate, get you a strip, you'll be taken care of, don't worry about it." So it took him a long time, but 10 years later, maybe 8 years later, he ended up moving to New York, and he got a strip called Wedlocked, and he stayed in New York for the rest of his life after that. And then he did Sherlock, Sherlock Holmes. And I think that the Major had seen this stuff and wanted him to do stuff for him, so he ended up doing 3 strips for him. Bob Merritt, and again, two colors, 4 colors, and Barry O'Neill. Those are the 2 strips he did for more fun. He also did Fu Manchu and Detective Comics, and he did Handy Andy and Adventure. The only funny strip that he did. I mean, he had quite a career after that. He also did some covers he did all covers to Action Comics from 1 through 6, except for number 1, which was the Superman cover. But he left DC to go work for the New York Post. No, the Daily News, sorry. And when he was at the Daily News, he became the resident sports cartoonist till the mid-50s. But he also did headers during the war. This is one of the pieces he did. And he had this signature, Leo. Oh, yeah, okay, so this is a Leo Amelia, it's in the wrong order, but this is Leo Amelia. This is This is a famous character that he created because the Brooklyn Dodgers were known as bums. So this is the bum. And it's a famous character because it's the only time that a comic strip character, a sports cartoonist, was put on the front page of the New York Daily News when they won the World Series. Because the cartoon said, "Now who's a bum?" Of course, then they moved to California. Well, that's on. One of the other people that worked there is Sven Alvin. He did a lot of adventure strips. I don't know, he did some pulp magazines before this. I don't know where he went after he stopped working for the Major, because he never really did superhero strips. He did adventure strips. He did Three Musketeers. He did a feature length. I mean, it was unusual in those days to have anything more than 4 pages in any of his books. This is a 9-page story called Follow the Borgias, which is in the book.
Do you know when they switched to color?
You mean all color?
Yeah.
I think it was issue number 9. On More Fun. I think New Comics was all color to begin with, but New Comics only had a pulp cover. It didn't have a glossy cover.
Were they the standard 32-page?
No, 64.
Oh, 64, okay.
Yeah, they were 64, and then they ended up going down to 52, and then they became 48, and then they became 32. Willie Eli and Tom Cooper were 2 guys who ended up doing a lot of strips for the Major. Willie Eli,
Can you see?
and a lot of these people ended up using pen names to make it look like there were a lot of different artists working there. Will Eisner tells a story that he ended up doing about 5 or 6 different pen names, because that way, when they sold the stuff overseas to a publisher in, say, the UK, it looked like they had a huge amount of variety, when in fact it was all coming from the same guy.
How cunning.
Cunning is it? Yeah, there you go. Tom Hickey and Will Eli both went to school in White Plains High School and graduated the same year and ended up going to art school together, and they both ended up working for the Major. They must have been like 21 or 22 when they started. Tom Hickey did a series called Golden Dragon, which is in the book, if you've seen it. And it's all based on adventures and, adventurers. And it was written by the Major. Hickey did about 6 different strips. This one's a More Fun. Wing Brady, that's another one for More Fun. Yeah, this is an early, I think this is from number 7 before they went full color. But you see what I mean about the fact that sometimes they just use 2 colors.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, this story is based on a pulp story that Wheeler-Nicholson did for called Blood Pearls, and it's in the back of this book. It's serialized in 6 episodes, 4-page episodes, so there's 24 pages. And I left it here, and I'm going to run it as a slideshow so you can look at it as it runs. So, it's pretty interesting. Hack did some interesting stuff. It's not your normal kind of run-of-the-mill, either clean, crisp, Alex Raymond type stuff, or funny type, crazy cat type stuff. It's kind of a mix.
Yeah. Seems like they had a lot of Yellow Peril stories around this time.
Yeah. Sullivan and Chew, and
Still mostly comedy? Still mostly for...
Comedy? No, I mean...
no, they played they were the
like
master
played-
villains.
Like
Oh.
as the master villain,
Like
not
Fu
as...
Manchu.
Yeah, not as a butt of a joke. Yeah.
Okay, so who's got questions? Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the newspaper syndicate that the Major ran?
You know, I don't know a lot about it. I do know that that's where he kind of used, you know, the thing, if you watch, I don't know, let's see if I can put
I
it up
think
here.
he founded that in the 20s.
Yeah, in the
It was
20s.
like 1925 or so.
He used it as a source to be able to get some of his art, his original artists. And you know, the funny thing is, I looked through New Fund 1 through 4. There are a lot of artists there who didn't work for him ever again. And I don't know why. And most of those artists never, other than one or two, never did any other comic art that I'm aware of in any of the series. So I think he ended up using his
Material from
his material, the
syndicate
artists
material.
from that syndicate to be able to use to get the book launched.
I think that's probably true too, but he didn't reprint the strips. Although he did some of the same material, he didn't use the syndicated strips as material for more fun.
No, not at all. No, but he used his pulp stories as the basis of characters that he would continue, and there's probably at least 8 or 9 of those. Yeah.
Can I please see the portrait photograph again, please?
Yeah. And that one?
Yes, thank you.
Another thing that I think is interesting is that when he launched Fun or New Fun, that, and this may have some bearing on the artists who showed up and then never showed up again, he was talking about using it as a portfolio piece to sell syndicated strips.
Not just syndicated strips, I also think that he wanted to go overseas and sell it to English-speaking territories in the UK and Australia and South Africa as well. Because that stuff was being packaged through, because Eisner still did WAGs, a couple of the books that were done in the UK. And I think he felt like there was a piece of that market for him to get. I don't think that he was ever able to do it though. And that stuff was kind of being done in 35, 36, 37 when this was, you know, hot. You know, I want to end up, I want to show you guys, and I don't have, I'm just going to go through this so you can take a look at it. This is the whole issue of More Fun 1. And I didn't break it down to individual PDFs so that I could get it sized properly. So I'm going to scroll through it so you can take a look at it. You can tell me to stop if you want to take a look at something. But that's Lyman Anderson's art for Jack Woods. But see, here's the thing. New Fun, they're talking about what the magazine's going to do. They want you to fill in the coupon to tell us what you want written. There's Lloyd Jaquette, who's the editor. Dick Loderer, who's the art director. There is no Vin Sullivan here. This is a list of all the characters or activity pages that are in the book. There's only 32 pages here on the first book.
And Lloyd Jaquette also packaged the Marvel Comics one. Also,
Yeah,
right?
Marvel Mystery 1, or Marvel 1. Sandra, the Secret Service is one of Nikki's favorites because she believes it's the first female comic book character, which is probably true. Certainly original. Oswald the Rabbit. I have no clue who it is. So here's the first Barry O'Neill, and it was not done by Leo Amelia. And Lawrence Laurer, I've never heard of before or since. And the style doesn't look familiar at all. And there's your mean, bad Chinaman. Pretty stereotypical. Barreau is an African-American artist, early African-American artist, comic book artist. He's got two different pages in here.
And he did some work for Donenfeld. He did Sally the Sleuth before Sandra came around.
Olga Messmer.
For the Lawyard, then a pseudonym or somebody else.
Could have been.
I don't know, I think that might be Sven Elvin. Did you see these? I mean, none of these characters really carried through. Don Draper carried through.
Can you go back, which one, who is this?
Loco
Yeah.
Luke?
Loco Luke is,
It says Jack Warren, but I don't think it is.
well, that was my question, because I never could reconcile the two Jack, so you don't think it is?
No, I think it is.
Well, this is Jack A. Warren.
Yeah.
There's another.
There's
Yeah, Jack A. Warren. I don't think it's anyone who stayed in the business. But, Jim, there's a horse.
No, it's one of my thousand.
Well, there you go. Okay, so one of the things, I'm sure that everyone's aware of it, but in order to get second-class mailing, you have to have 2 pages of text. That's the reason why there's text stories in the comics, or in the old days, anyways. So they ended up doing this as filler, but it was. And enabled them to get second-class mailing privileges, which were very cheap. By the way, this is the first, there were other reprint books. This is the first book that ever took outside advertising. Which is, most people don't talk about, but I think that's kind of interesting.
How did they decide to do that?
I think he wanted the money.
Well, no, that's a fair answer, right? But
Yeah,
I mean,
no, I think it was predicated on the fact that he could help offset the cost of publishing.
Yeah,
Not
so
to
it
mention
is,
it's during the Depression.
Yeah,
Every dollar counted.
that's for sure.
there's certainly no lack of it today.
Money?
No, advertising.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know this was going on back then.
Advertising?
There's the class.
Mac.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't know
It's all
that.
there.
Oh yeah.
It's the same. It's the same.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. The
didn't
Charles
realize it was
Atlas
that
stuff
old.
is it goes back to like physical culture magazine.
See, he's kicking the chair
That's
instead
before
of
this.
sand. Look at, there's sand. Oh, that's
Yeah.
bad. That's bad.
Charles Atlas, right?
Look at him, yeah.
Actually, into the.
Yeah, I think that goes a few years before this even. Physical culture magazine, which they say Joe Shuster would read a lot of. It's like
Yeah.
a workout magazine.
Exactly, and he modeled Superman after
Yeah.
one of the big strongmen.
Right. Bernard McFadden's magazine.
So then they do a sports piece. And here, the thing is, they give their artists pieces to illustrate as well. But they have these little pieces too. National Detective System, you can become a detective.
Yeah.
Now, the funny thing is, I think the radio was only in the first issue, maybe the second issue. They dropped the radio piece and then it was only just movies after that.
They must have been using an advertising agency.
They must have, yeah. But, because, obviously a lot of kids needed good blades, so, and Dizzy Dean said it's good, so it's gotta be good.
Yeah, sharpest that he's ever used.
Never used. But they're, okay, juniors.
But they were having like Firestone tire commercials in these back then too. I remember looking through some of this.
Yeah. So this is Lazo Bengal Lancer. That's Gary Cooper. I'm sure you can see the resemblance. That's Tim McCoy. That's Johnny Mac Brown. You can learn music the quick, easy way. Model aircraft. I think this is one of it was either this. It may have only lasted a couple of issues, if that. But see, then, they did a page and then they sold the ad for it. Aviation was really big in the 30s, really big.
Yeah.
I mean, there were probably a dozen aviation strips in the comic strips, and Lindbergh was the hero of the decade.
Well, 1935 would have been Howard Hughes.
Yeah. That's not the Spruce Goose, though.
No, that's not.
That's a Clipper. I'm sure it's a Pan Am Clipper.
Bruce is much bigger.
Well, there's the Texaco sign.
No. No, that was a consolidated aircraft. You could tell by the design of the tail.
The single.
Yeah. But it's either consolidated, Sikorsky, or Boeing. Did they have design features? And the biggest Clipper was the Boeing. Even Roosevelt flew in those.
Built yourself a
Changing the
model.
name of the comic also a way to save money with the post office. I thought I read that somewhere, like if you started a new series or something like that. You know, I thought
Well,
that, like,
it had certain requirements in order
Yeah.
for you to make the second class.
Yeah, I think if you changed the title but kept the numbering, it
Yeah.
was cheaper than starting over with a new title from number one.
right. 'Cause that's like a lot of comics from that time. Like there's all these weird series.
They
where
changed
kind
it
of
over
the
to different
same-
names. Yeah.
Yeah,
of course.
New Comics
Yeah,
becomes
it
Fun
did.
Comics becomes Comics Fun or something.
Yeah. Well, New Comics became
New Adventure.
New Adventure, which
Yeah.
became Adventure.
Yeah, that's something
By-
to do with the numbering system.
By the way, this artwork here is Bob Weinstein.
The titles changed almost as much as the names of the corporations.
Yeah, the corporations changed a lot. More razor blades, amazing.
A lot of advertising for adult men.
Yeah, exactly. So it depends. I mean, obviously, some ad agencies sold the hell out. See, Bob actually put his first name on that one.
Buckskin Jim.
Tell your
Oh, yeah, no, I could talk a lot about Bugsy.
tell your friends you found fun.
That's a great one.
They keep.
Did that
Popular science.
last a long time?
So it's
Well,
interesting.
not a long time, but it
A couple of years or?
multiple issues.
But I find it interesting that they would end up taking putting together a craft page, and then they would sell. You know, here's the science page with the new with the thing on
Television.
Oh, it's just a page out of Hugo Gernsback, right?
Exactly.
This is all modeled after Gernsback's.
Right.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, amazing.
Yeah.
Air Wonder.
Stamps and coins. Oh, look it! You can get some extra money.
Big that money is.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. Well, you know, more fun was big in those days. I find it interesting that they have homemakers thing. You know, it's funny that with rifles and watches, and wagons and banjos. In the old days, there was a wide variety of comic books, so that there was a big audience across all types of strata, of both male and female. I think that's another Warren strip. There's Burrow. And this stuff looks like Fleischer cartoon stuff from the
Yeah.
30s. Get her. Some of it look downright crude.
Well, it was the first issue.
Those are super police. Ken Fitch did stuff. Clem wrote stuff. Clem Creditor was an artist who worked for them for about 10 issues.
Was some of the stuff maybe rejected by the syndicate?
Not that I'm aware of, but well, look at it. They had a color out on the back.
Wow.
Ralston.
You could get a dandy zip gun. Well, it's not what you think is a zip gun. Anyways, it's. Okay, so now do you have questions? We're supposed to be done. Good.
Could you name, you mentioned the Flying Tigers, who was all in that again?
That was 300.
I mean, from,
Those guys?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, you know, the thing is, there's no names on any of them. Tex Hill was the guy who talked with the accent, the bald guy.
Oh, okay.
He was in this, all these guys were in the second pursuit squad in the Panagos. Ed Rector was the balding guy who had the sash around his neck. I think those.
Because my dad was in the Flying Tigers. So
Oh, cool. I think those are the only two.
Okay.
They passed away. They passed away.
No, I understand, yeah.
But I interviewed Tex in Texas. Can't remember where he lives.
You did these about 20 years ago.
Who's the other one?
Right?
Yeah, about 25 years ago.
Yeah, who's the other one? Those were about 15 years ago.
San
What?
Antonio.
He lived in San Antonio. Thank you. And Ed Rector lived in Alexandria, Virginia. Yeah.
Which one of the Flying Tigers became a judge and was at the Manson trial? Do you recall?
Yeah. Shit.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but I always thought that was.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. He became a federal court judge and was the judge at the Manson trial. He won a Congressional Medal of Honor, I think. Yeah, he shot down 5 planes in one mission in Italy. He left China and ended up going to Europe to fly P-51s. But you're right.
Oh, was that the one who had the P-51 called Big Hal?
No.
Okay, that was another.
Ding Howe was Texas Hill, the guy that you saw in that picture.
Okay, pardon me, okay.
Ding Howe was Texas P-51.